This is the story of the awesome, amazing Big Brown Bear. The Big Brown Bear came lolloping over the mountain. He was on his way to the village to meet his best friend. This is where you can include your name. Bear loved to go and see his friend because they had so many wonderful adventures. Bear lolloped down the road and into the park, and there on the swing was, well, you. Bear had a name he only gave to you, and that was Bestie. Now that was because you are his best friend. Bear and you always knew how to make each other smile. You would laugh and run, and on rainy days would go puddle jumping, wearing your red wellies. You would find a big puddle and jump into it and splash each other. You didn't mind, because you could always go back to Bear's house, where his mum would wrap you in a lovely big warm towel, and you could sit by the fire, and she would bring you hot chocolate and a stack of yummy toast. Bear's mum made the best toast in the world. In fact, she had medals for it. But that's another story. So there you were in the park. Bear chatted away, swinging to see who could swing the highest, and thinking about today and what it would bring, when along came Snotty. Now Snotty was an odd sort of boy. You liked him very much, but well, you see, he had what they called a green 11 on his face, just between his nose and top lip, and every now and then made a sniffing sound. And when he did, the green 11 would disappear up his nose. But don't worry, it would return within a moment or two. "What are you up to?" said Snotty. Bear and Bestie thought for a while and chatted together and decided they would go to see Mr. Cherrybun the baker, as Bestie had his pocket money. "Oh, yes, let's do that," Snotty sniffed, and another 11 disappeared. "But first, let's climb the slide." Now, this slide was a really big slide. "And see who can slide the fastest." The three friends ran to the slide and giggled their way up to the top, one by one launching themselves down, shouting, "Whee!" all the way until they came to a bump at the bottom, laughing their heads off. So off marched the friends, Bear, Bestie and Snotty, into the village to see what yummy cakes and buns Mr. Cherrybun the baker had in his wonderful, amazing shop. When they got there, they saw a queue lined up outside the shop door waiting for Mr. Cherrybun to open his shop. So they looked in the window. There were cream cherry buns the size of footballs, yummy cream cakes, ones that were like fingers, the tops covered in chocolate, big family cakes for sharing, and loaves of bread in all types of shapes, squares, round and long, all golden brown. Finally, the lock on the door clanged, and the key turned, and the door opened. Mr. Cherrybun had a bell on the door, which rang as the door opened, so he knew someone was coming into the shop. Often he was in the back in the kitchen, baking, so this was a great way of him knowing when people wanted serving. In marched the customers to buy their bread and sticky treats. When it was Bear, Bestie and Snotty's turn, Bestie reached into his pocket and pulled out enough money so the friends could have a cake or sticky bun each. "Well, hello, you young scallywags," said Mr. Cherrybun. "What can I do for you, like?" Well, the three friends had their faces pressed against the counter glass, which had the goodies behind it. Bear sighed. Bestie's eyes grew so big they almost popped out his head. Snotty sniffed and licked his lips. It seemed like forever. Then they made their choices. Bear had one of the biggest cherry buns. Well, he said, I have rather a big tummy. They all fell about laughing. Bestie decided on a cream-filled chocolate finger thingy that Mr. Cherry Bun called an eclair, and Snotty decided on a big currant bun, or fly cake as they called it. Mr. Cherry Bun put each choice into a really handy small box so they could carry them. Bestie paid, and off they went to eat them. They decided to go and sit on the bank of the river by the bridge. The sun was out, and it was a warm morning when they got to sit by the river. They opened their cake boxes and scoffed their yummy choices. As they were doing this, along the river path cycled Mr. Plod the policeman. He stopped by the friends and said, Well, hello, what's all this then? He was very tall, but very fat, and when he got off his bike, his tummy wobbled. Well, you three, what you up to then? Are you being good, or are you being bad? Bestie noticed Mr. Plod was looking at his half-eaten cream cake, and when he pointed to the river, Mr. Plod's eyes followed his cake every moment. The friends smiled at each other as they saw Mr. Plod's eyes staring at the cake. Bestie stood up and pointed this way and that, and Mr. Plod's head moved as if in musical tune to the direction of the cake. Bestie said, I've had enough cake. Would you like to finish it, Mr. Plod? Well, I shouldn't, you see, I'm on a diet. But okay, just this once. The friends had never seen a cake disappear so fast. Mr. Plod got on his bike, thanked them for sharing, and wobbled off down the pathway. As he got out of sight, the friends just fell about laughing at Mr. Plod's love of cakes. That man loved cakes. So the friends lay back on the river bank, looking up at the clouds, trying to make shapes or faces of them. It was so warm and quiet and peaceful. Well, apart from the occasional sniff or three from Snotty. Eventually, Snotty sat up and said he had to go home now, as his mum was taking him to see his great aunt Gertrude. She was a huge woman too. She lived miles away, and it would take hours to get there, and he really wasn't looking forward to it, but he knew he should. Bestie said to Bear, What shall we do? Bear said, Fancy some toast. Bear was always hungry, so Bestie and Bear went lolloping back over the mountain to Bear's house. Mummy Bear opened the door. Oh, hello, dears, she said. Fancy a nice piece of toast? How yummy. Another day well spent.